When my fiancé died, my parents chose my brother's graduation party over my grief. But when they discovered the $4.2 million inheritance I didn't even know existed, suddenly they cared about my future. What they did next will shock you. I'm Meg Carter. I'm 35 years old, and 2 Tuesdays ago, my fiancé Ryan collapsed at his office and died before I could even say goodbye. The funeral was last Saturday. You'd think that would be the worst part of this story. You'd be wrong. The worst part happened at 11:47 p.m. on the night Ryan died. I was sitting on our kitchen floor, still in the clothes I'd worn to the hospital. My 7-year-old daughter Emily was finally asleep upstairs after hours of sobbing. The house felt so quiet, it hurt. I picked up my phone and called my parents. Not because I wanted to, but because I literally didn't know what else to do. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial. My mom answered on the fourth ring. I could hear music and laughter in the background. "Mom," I whispered, "Ryan's gone. He died today. I need you." There was a pause. Then she said, "Oh, honey, we're at Jake's graduation party right now. Your brother just got his MBA. Can we call you tomorrow?" My brother's graduation party, while I was sitting in the wreckage of my entire life. But here's the thing that's going to blow your mind. That phone call wasn't even close to being the most devastating thing my family would do to me in the weeks that followed. Because 3 weeks later at Ryan's estate reading, I discovered something that changed everything I thought I knew about the people who were supposed to love me most. Something that made me realize my parents hadn't just abandoned me in my grief. They'd been planning something far worse all along. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about Ryan first, because you need to understand what I lost to understand why what my family did was so unforgivable. I met Ryan during my sophomore year at UCLA. I was struggling in organic chemistry, sitting in the library at 2 a.m. crying over molecular diagrams that might as well have been written in ancient Greek. That's when this guy with messy brown hair and the kindest eyes I'd ever seen slid into the chair across from me. "Hey," he said quietly, "you look like you could use a study partner." Ryan was a year ahead of me, majoring in biomedical engineering. He should have been way too busy to help some random girl having a breakdown over carbon bonds, but he stayed with me until 4 in the morning, explaining concepts until they finally clicked. That was Ryan. He saw people struggling and he helped. No questions asked, no strings attached. We started dating 3 months later. He'd pick me up after my evening classes, always carrying an extra coffee because he knew I'd forgotten to eat lunch again. When I had to work late shifts at the campus bookstore to pay for textbooks, he'd show up at closing time with takeout from whatever place had the shortest line. The first time he told me he loved me was during finals week of my junior year. I was having a complete meltdown because I'd forgotten about a 20-page paper that was due the next morning. Ryan spent the entire night helping me research and outline, then made me breakfast while I wrote the conclusion. As I was printing the final pages, he handed me my coffee and said, "You know, I'm completely in love with you, right?" Just like that, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. We got engaged 2 years after graduation. Ryan proposed during one of our weekend DIY projects. We were refinishing this beat-up dining table we'd found at a thrift store, and I was complaining about how the wood stain wasn't going on evenly. He got down on one knee right there in the garage, his hand still covered in wood stain, and said, "Meg Carter, will you marry me and let me help you fix things for the rest of our lives?" The ring was small. We were both still paying off student loans, and Ryan was saving every penny for the house he wanted to buy us. But it was perfect because it was him. We tried for kids, right after the engagement. Ryan wanted a whole house full. He'd already started converting the spare bedroom into a nursery, painting the walls this soft yellow color because he said it would work for either a boy or a girl. But month after month, the pregnancy tests came back negative. Then, I finally got pregnant, and we lost the baby at 12 weeks. Then it happened again, 6 months later. Ryan held me through every disappointment. He never made me feel broken, even when I felt like my body was betraying us both. He'd make these elaborate midnight snacks when I couldn't sleep, and we'd sit on the kitchen counter eating ice cream and planning our future. "It'll happen when it's supposed to happen," he'd say. And until then, we practice being the best team we can be. That's when we decided to foster Emily. She was 5 when she came to us, this tiny girl who'd been through 3 different homes and barely spoke above a whisper. Ryan spent hours on the floor with her building elaborate Lego cities and reading the same bedtime story over and over until she finally started to trust us. When the adoption went through 2 years later, Ryan cried harder than I'd ever seen him cry. He kept saying, "She's really ours. She's really staying." Emily changed everything for us. Suddenly, our house was full of laughter and finger paintings taped to the refrigerator, and Ryan teaching her how to ride a bike in our driveway every evening after work. We were happy. God, we were so happy. Ryan worked as a software engineer for a medical device company. He loved his job because he got to design programs that helped doctors save lives. He'd come home every day with stories about some new project that was going to help kids with diabetes or elderly patients with heart conditions. He was the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday, who brought soup to coworkers when they were sick, who spent his weekends volunteering at the animal shelter. My parents never really got Ryan. They thought he was too quiet, too focused on helping other people instead of climbing the corporate ladder. My dad would make these little comments about Ryan's modest salary, like somehow making less money made him less of a man. But Ryan didn't care about their approval. He cared about us, about building a life that mattered. Every Tuesday morning, he'd wake up early to make coffee for both of us. Not because I asked him to, but because he knew I had early meetings and he wanted to make sure I started my day right. He'd leave little notes in my coffee mug. Stupid things like, "You're going to crush that presentation today," or "Don't forget you're amazing." That's what makes this whole thing so much worse. Ryan died on a Tuesday, which means the last thing he did was make me coffee and leave me a note that said, "Love you more today than yesterday, but not as much as tomorrow." I still have that note. I'll never throw it away, because in 3 weeks, I was going to learn that while I was grieving the loss of the most generous, loving man I'd ever known, my own parents were sitting around figuring out how to profit from his death. Tuesday, March 7th. I remember the date because it's burned into my brain forever. It started like every other Tuesday. Ryan's alarm went off at 6:30. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "Coffee's brewing, beautiful." I mumbled something about 5 more minutes and pulled the pillow over my head. When I finally dragged myself to the kitchen 20 minutes later, there was my mug waiting for me, steam still rising from the coffee. The note was tucked under the handle like always. "Love you more today than yesterday, but not as much as tomorrow." I took a picture of it with my phone. I don't know why. Maybe some part of me knew I'd want to remember that moment forever. Ryan was at the counter making Emily's lunch, humming some song that had been stuck in his head for days. Emily was at the table in her school uniform trying to braid her hair and getting increasingly frustrated. "Daddy, it's not working," she whined. Ryan abandoned the sandwich he was making and knelt down next to her chair. "Here, let me help." His big hands were so gentle as he worked through her tangles. "There. Perfect." Emily beamed up at him. "Will you teach me how to do it myself tonight?" "Absolutely. We'll practice until you're a braiding expert." That's the last conversation I heard them have. Ryan dropped Emily off at school like he did every morning. He texted me at 8:15. "Little Miss is delivered safely. Coffee date after work." I texted back, "Always. Love you." 3 hours later, my phone rang. I was in the middle of a budget meeting when my phone started buzzing. I ignored it the first time. Then it rang again and again. My boss looked at me with raised eyebrows. "Take it," she said. The number on my screen wasn't one I recognized. "Hello? Is this Meg Carter?" "Yes." "This is Jennifer from Mercy General Hospital. Your fiancé, Ryan Matthews, was brought in about 20 minutes ago. You need to come now." The room tilted. "What happened? Is he okay?" "Ma'am, I can't discuss details over the phone. How quickly can you get here?" "I don't remember leaving the office. I don't remember the drive to the hospital. I know I called my best friend Sarah and asked her to pick up Emily from school, but I couldn't tell you what I actually said. What I do remember is running through those automatic doors and seeing Ryan's coworker Marcus pacing in the waiting room. His face was white. Marcus, what happened? He just collapsed, Meg. One minute, he was showing me this new code he'd written, and the next minute, he was on the floor. The paramedics said it looked like a stroke, but he's only 33. How does a healthy 33-year-old have a stroke? A doctor in scrubs appeared next to us. Family of Ryan Matthews. That's me. I'm his fiancée. Is he... The doctor's expression told me everything before he said a word. I'm Dr. Rodriguez. I'm very sorry, but Mr. Matthews suffered a massive stroke. We did everything we could, but the damage was too extensive. He passed away about 10 minutes ago. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually staggered backward. No, I heard myself saying. No, that's not right. He was fine this morning. He made coffee. He helped Emily with her hair. People don't just die from making coffee. Dr. Rodriguez put his hand on my shoulder. These things can happen without warning, especially with certain underlying conditions we might not know about. I know this is devastating. Can I see him? They led me to a room that smelled like disinfectant and sadness. Ryan was lying on a bed, machines turned off, looking like he was just sleeping. Except his skin was too pale and his chest wasn't moving. I sat next to him and took his hand. It was still warm. Ryan, I whispered. Baby, you have to wake up. Emily's waiting for her braiding lesson. And we have that coffee date, remember you promised. But he didn't wake up. He was never going to wake up. I stayed with him for 2 hours. I told him about my day, about the budget meeting, about how Emily had eaten all her vegetables the night before, and he should have seen how proud she looked. I told him I loved him over and over until the words stopped making sense. When I finally left the hospital, the sun was setting. It felt wrong that the world kept turning when mine had just stopped completely. Sarah was waiting at my house with Emily. She'd told her that Daddy was sick and had to go to heaven, but Emily didn't really understand what that meant yet. Where's Daddy? Emily asked when I walked in. Sarah said he went to heaven, but I thought heaven was far away. I knelt down and pulled her into my arms. Daddy got very sick today, sweetheart. So sick that his body stopped working. But he loved you so much, and that love is always going to be with you. Sadom. But who's going to teach me to braid my hair? And that's when I completely fell apart. Because Ryan was supposed to teach her to braid her hair and help her with homework and walk her down the aisle at her wedding someday. He was supposed to be here for all the big moments and all the little ones. Emily and I cried together on the living room floor until we were both exhausted. Then we climbed into my bed, and I told her stories about all the adventures Daddy was probably having in heaven until she finally fell asleep. That's when I made the phone call to my parents. Because in that moment of absolute devastation, when I felt like I was drowning in grief, I needed my family. I needed someone to tell me that everything was going to be okay, even though I knew it wasn't. I needed someone to help me figure out how to tell a 7-year-old that the only father she'd ever really known was never coming home. I needed someone to sit with me in the dark and help me figure out how to keep breathing. Instead, I got, "We're at Jake's graduation party. Can we call you tomorrow?" But even that betrayal was nothing compared to what I was about to discover about the people who were supposed to love me most. After my parents hung up on me, I sat on that kitchen floor until my legs went numb. Emily was finally asleep upstairs. But every few minutes I'd hear her crying through the walls. She'd wake up, remember that Daddy wasn't coming home, and start sobbing all over again. Then she'd exhaust herself back to sleep, and the cycle would repeat. I wanted to go comfort her, but I couldn't move. I kept staring at Ryan's coffee mug in the sink at the sandwich he'd started making for Emily's lunch and never finished. The bread was still sitting on the counter, getting stale. At midnight, my phone buzzed. For one insane second, I thought maybe my parents had come to their senses. Maybe they'd left Jake's party and were driving over to help. It was a text from my mom. "So sorry about Ryan. We'll call tomorrow to discuss arrangements." Discuss arrangements. Like Ryan's death was a business meeting they needed to schedule. I threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, but I didn't care if it broke. Nothing mattered anymore. That's when I heard a soft knock at the front door. I dragged myself off the floor and opened it to find Ryan's sister-in-law Lisa standing on my porch with a casserole dish and tears in her eyes. "I came as soon as I heard," she whispered. "How are you holding up?" And I just collapsed into her arms, right there in the doorway. This woman, who wasn't even technically my family, yet understood that I needed someone while my own parents were toasting my brother's MBA. Lisa came inside and sat with me in the dark. She didn't try to tell me everything would be okay or that Ryan was in a better place. She just sat there and let me cry until I had no tears left. "Emily keeps asking when Daddy's coming home," I finally managed to say. "Kids that age don't really understand permanent," Lisa said gently. "It's going to take time, but you don't have to figure it all out tonight." She stayed until 3 in the morning, helping me make a list of people I needed to call, helping me think through what Emily would need for the next few days. Real, practical help from someone who actually cared. The next morning, Wednesday, my parents finally called, not to check on me or Emily, to ask about the funeral arrangements. "We'll need to know the date as soon as possible," my dad said. "Jake's graduation ceremony is Saturday, so we're hoping we can do the funeral on Sunday." I stared at the phone. "You want to schedule Ryan's funeral around Jake's graduation?" "Well, we can't miss the ceremony, Meg. Jake's worked so hard for this degree. Ryan would understand." Ryan would understand. The man who'd spent 4 years putting everyone else's needs before his own would somehow understand being treated as an afterthought at his own funeral. "The funeral is Saturday," I said, 2 o'clock. "That's not going to work for us." "Then don't come." I hung up before my dad could respond. My phone rang 30 seconds later. It was my mom this time. "Megan Elizabeth Carter, that was completely uncalled for. We're trying to be supportive here." "Supportive Mom, Ryan died yesterday and you haven't asked once how Emily and I are doing. You haven't asked if we need anything." The first words out of Dad's mouth were about insurance policies. "We're grieving too, you know. Ryan was going to be our son-in-law." "Were you grieving at Jake's party last night? Because you sounded pretty cheerful when I called." Silence. "Look," my mom said finally, "we'll try to make the funeral work, but we really need to talk about practical matters. Ryan left you and Emily in a difficult situation financially." That's when I realized they had no idea what they were talking about. Ryan and I had never discussed our finances with my parents. They just assumed that because he wasn't flashy with money, he didn't have any. "We're fine, Mom." "So, honey, be realistic. You're going to need help. We're prepared to step in," and I said we're fine. But the truth was, I had no idea if we were fine. Ryan handled most of our finances. I knew we had savings and that he had a life insurance policy through work, but I didn't know the details. I'd trusted him to take care of everything, and now I was going to have to figure it all out alone. The next few days were a blur of phone calls and paperwork and well-meaning neighbors bringing casseroles I was too nauseous to eat. Emily went to stay with Lisa and Ryan's brother David because I couldn't even take care of myself, let alone a grieving 7-year-old. My parents called twice more before the funeral, not to ask how I was doing, to ask about life insurance payouts and whether Ryan had a will. "We're just trying to help you plan for the future," my dad said during the second call. "You can't raise Emily on your own without some kind of financial assistance." "From who?" "Well, from family. We've been talking, and we think the best thing would be for you and Emily to move back home for a while. Just until you get back on your feet." Move back home. To the house where I'd never felt good enough, where every conversation somehow became about what I was doing wrong or how I could be doing better. That's not happening. Meg, you need to be practical. You have a child to think about now. Emily is my daughter. I'll figure it out. With what money? Yes, that's not your concern. But after I hung up, I sat in Ryan's office and stared at the stack of papers I needed to sort through. Bank statements and insurance documents and legal papers I didn't understand. The numbers swam in front of my eyes. What if my parents were right? What if I couldn't do this alone? That's when I found Ryan's notebook. He was old-fashioned about some things, and he'd kept a handwritten record of all our important financial information. His neat engineer's handwriting listed account numbers and passwords and contact information for lawyers and insurance agents. But it was the note on the first page that made me start crying all over again. For Meg, everything we built together is yours now. You're stronger than you know, and Emily needs you to believe that. Don't let anyone convince you that you can't do this alone. You were never alone. You had me, and now you have all of this. Love, Ryan. He dated it just 2 months earlier. Like somehow he'd known I might need the reminder. That's when I realized my parents weren't trying to help me. They were trying to control me. They'd never believed I could take care of myself. And Ryan's death looked like the perfect opportunity to prove they were right. But they had no idea what Ryan had actually left us. And they were about to find out in the most humiliating way possible. Saturday arrived gray and drizzling, like even the weather understood that the world had lost something precious. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror that morning, staring at the black dress I'd bought 3 days earlier. I'd never owned funeral clothes before. At 35, I'd been lucky enough to avoid that particular shopping trip. Emily was getting ready in her room with Lisa's help. I could hear them talking quietly about which shoes would be most comfortable for walking in the cemetery. Such a practical conversation about such an impossible day. My parents arrived at the funeral home 15 minutes late. Not fashionably late, just late enough to make an entrance. I was greeting people at the door when I saw them walk in. My dad was checking his watch, and my mom was whispering something to my brother Jake, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. They didn't come over to me right away. Instead, they walked around the room introducing themselves to Ryan's coworkers and college friends, playing the part of the grieving in-laws. I watched my mother shake hands with Ryan's boss and tilt her head in that sympathetic way she'd perfected at other people's tragedies. Such a shock, I heard her saying. So young, we're just heartbroken. But when Ryan's boss started talking about what an incredible engineer Ryan had been, how he'd designed software that was going to help thousands of patients, my mom's eyes glazed over. She was already looking around the room for someone more important to talk to. My dad spent most of the visitation asking Ryan's brother David questions about the logistics of death. Who pays for what? How long these things usually take, whether there would be any complications with the estate. David looked confused by the questions. I'm sorry. Are you concerned about something specific? Oh, no, my dad backtracked. Just trying to understand the process, in case Meg needs help navigating everything. The service itself was beautiful. Ryan's colleagues told stories about his kindness, his brilliant mind, his terrible jokes. Emily sat between Lisa and me, holding my hand so tightly I lost circulation in my fingers. When it was my turn to speak, I walked to the podium on shaking legs. I'd written something the night before, but when I looked out at all those faces, the words disappeared. Ryan used to leave me notes in my coffee mug every morning, I heard myself saying. Stupid little things like, "You're going to crush that presentation," or "Don't forget you're amazing." The last note he left said, "Love you more today than yesterday, but not as much as tomorrow." My voice broke, but I kept going. That was Ryan. He always believed tomorrow would be better because he was going to spend it loving the people who mattered to him. He loved Emily like she was his own blood from the day she walked into our lives. He loved his work because he got to help people. He even loved my parents, even though they never quite understood him. I glanced at my parents in the front row. My mom was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, but my dad was checking his phone. Ryan taught me that love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every single day. And even though he's gone, I'm going to keep choosing love. For Emily, for the life we built together, and for everyone whose life he touched. After the burial, people came back to our house for the reception. Ryan's work friends brought photo albums and shared stories about projects he'd worked on. His college roommate drove 6 hours from San Francisco just to tell me about the time Ryan stayed up all night helping him study for a chemistry final. But while everyone else was celebrating Ryan's life, my parents were conducting their own private investigation. I found my dad in Ryan's office looking through the papers on his desk. "Dad, what are you doing?" "Oh, just trying to get a sense of what you're dealing with here. Have you found any documentation about life insurance? That's not your concern." "Meg, honey, we're trying to help. Have you thought about how you're going to pay the mortgage, the car payments, Emily's school tuition?" The truth was, I'd been so numb with grief, I hadn't thought about any of it. But I wasn't about to admit that to him. "We'll be fine. Will you? Because from what I can see here, Ryan's salary was decent, but not exactly enough to set you up for life. And now that income is gone." Before I could respond, my mom appeared in the doorway. "There you are. We need to talk about practical matters. David mentioned that Ryan had a will. When is the reading?" "Next week." "Good. We'll plan to be there." "You don't need to be there. It's just a formality." My parents exchanged a look. "Meg," my mom said in that tone she used to use when I was 12 and being difficult, "we know you're grieving, but you can't just bury your head in the sand. You have responsibilities now, to Emily, to Ryan's memory, to your family." "What does that mean?" "It means we're prepared to help you, but we need to understand the full financial picture first. How much life insurance was there? What kind of savings did Ryan have? We can't make plans without knowing what we're working with." That's when it hit me. They weren't here to support me through the worst day of my life. They were here to assess my financial situation, so they could figure out how to insert themselves into it. "Get out of his office." "Excuse me." I said, "Get out. This is my house, Ryan's office, and you have no business going through his things." "Megan, we're trying to help you." "No, you're not. You're trying to control me, just like you always have." My dad stepped forward. "That's enough. You're clearly not thinking straight right now, which is understandable. But you're going to need our help whether you want to admit it or not. I don't need anything from you. Really, because from where I'm standing, you're a single mother with no real career prospects about to lose your primary source of income. Pride isn't going to pay Emily's college tuition." That's when Ryan's brother David appeared behind my parents. He'd obviously heard the raised voices. "Is everything okay in here?" "Everything's fine," my dad said quickly. "We were just discussing some practical matters with Meg." David looked at me. "Meg, my parents were leaving." David stepped aside to let them pass, but I could see the questions in his eyes. After they left the room, he closed the door. "What was that about?" "They think I can't take care of Emily and myself without their help. Can you? I don't know, but I'm sure as hell not letting them swoop in and take over my life just because Ryan's gone." David sat down in Ryan's desk chair. "For what it's worth, Ryan talked about you all the time at work. He never once expressed any concern about your ability to handle things if something happened to him. In fact, he used to say you were the strongest person he knew. He said that all the time. He said you'd survived a childhood that would have broken most people, put yourself through college, built a career, and then opened your heart to a damaged little girl who needed a mom. He said if anything ever happened to him, he knew you'd figure out how to not just survive, but thrive." I started crying again, but they were different tears this time. Not the desperate, drowning tears of the past week. These felt cleaner somehow. "The will reading is Tuesday," I told David. Ryan never talked to me about the details, but he left me that notebook with all our financial information. "I think we're going to be okay." More than okay, probably. Ryan was really good with money. He just didn't like to flash it around. As David said that, I remembered something. A conversation Ryan and I had had about 6 months earlier when my dad had made another comment about Ryan's modest lifestyle. "Your parents don't know about the investments, do they?" Ryan had asked. "What investments?" "The ones I've been making since college. The Apple stock I bought with my first paycheck, the Bitcoin I picked up when it was worth basically nothing, the rental properties I own in 3 different states. I'd stared at him. What rental properties? Ryan had grinned. The ones that are going to pay for Emily's college and our retirement, and probably several other things we haven't thought of yet. Why didn't you ever tell me how much? Because it doesn't matter how much. What matters is that we'll always be okay. But I've learned that talking about money changes how people treat you. And I like how your family treats me now. Like I'm just Ryan, not like I'm a bank account they might want to make withdrawals from. I hadn't understood what he meant at the time. But I was about to learn. In 3 days, my parents were going to discover that the man they'd dismissed as financially mediocre had actually been worth more money than they'd see in their lifetimes. And they were going to show me exactly who they really were. Tuesday morning, I woke up with that sick feeling you get when you know something terrible is about to happen. The will reading was scheduled for 10 a.m. at Ryan's lawyer's office downtown. I'd met Thomas Brennan once before when Ryan and I had updated our emergency contacts after Emily's adoption. He was one of those old-school lawyers who still wore 3-piece suits and kept actual law books on his shelves. Emily was at school, which was a relief. She'd been asking questions I didn't know how to answer about why Daddy had papers that needed to be read out loud and whether it meant he was coming back. I arrived at the law office 15 minutes early, hoping to have a few quiet moments to prepare myself. But my parents were already there, sitting in the waiting room like they owned the place. "Oh, good you're here," my mom said, not getting up to hug me. "We were just discussing the logistics with Mr. Brennan's secretary." "Whoa, what logistics?" "Well, we'll need copies of everything, obviously. And we should probably set up a meeting afterward to discuss how to handle Emily's financial future." I stared at her. "Why would you need copies of anything?" "Meg," my dad said in that patient tone that meant he thought I was being stupid. "We're going to be helping you manage this inheritance. We need to understand what we're working with." Before I could respond, Mr. Brennan appeared and invited us into his office. It was one of those rooms that smelled like leather, and old money with dark wood paneling and diplomas covering every wall. "Please sit wherever you're comfortable," he said, gesturing to the chairs arranged around his desk. "I know this is difficult, but I'll try to make the process as straightforward as possible." My parents settled into the chairs closest to his desk like they were the primary beneficiaries. I sat slightly apart from them, suddenly feeling like an outsider at my own fiancé's will reading. Mr. Brennan opened a thick file and pulled out several documents. Ryan's will is quite comprehensive, but the main provisions are straightforward. The first thing I need to mention is that all of his assets are held in a revocable trust that he established about 2 years ago. My dad leaned forward. "What kind of assets are we talking about?" "I'm getting to that, but first let me read the personal message Ryan left for Meg." He handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Ryan's familiar handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. "Should I read it out loud?" I asked. "That's entirely up to you." I looked at my parents, who were watching me with barely concealed impatience. Something about their eagerness made me want to keep Ryan's words private. I'll read it to myself first. The letter was 2 pages long, written in the neat block letters Ryan used for important things. "My dearest Meg, if you're reading this, then the worst has happened and I'm not there to take care of you and Emily anymore. I'm so sorry, my love. I know how scared you must be right now, but I need you to know that you're going to be okay. More than okay. I've been working for 15 years to make sure that if anything ever happened to me, the people I love most would never have to worry about money. By now, you've probably heard your parents making comments about your financial situation. They've always assumed that because I don't drive a flashy car or talk about investments, I must not have any money. They're wrong. The truth is, I've been extremely fortunate with my investments. I started buying tech stocks in college with money from my part-time jobs, and I got lucky with the timing. I bought Apple in 2003, Google in 2004, Amazon in 2005. I bought Bitcoin when it was $12. I also own 6 rental properties in Austin, Denver, and Portland that generate about $18,000 a month in passive income. The total value of the trust is approximately $4.2 million. All of it goes to you with Emily as the secondary beneficiary if anything happens to you. I never told you the exact numbers because I didn't want it to change how we lived our lives. I loved our little house and our secondhand furniture and our Saturday morning pancakes. I love that you fell in love with me when I was just a guy who helped you with the chemistry homework, not because I had money, but I also loved knowing that you and Emily would always be safe. Your parents are going to be shocked when they hear these numbers. They're probably going to want to help you manage this money. Please don't let them. You're smarter and stronger than they've ever given you credit for, and this money is yours to do with as you see fit. There's one more thing. I left your parents a letter too. Mr. Brennan will give it to them after he reads the will. I think you should hear what I had to say. I love you forever, Ryan. I folded the letter with trembling hands, my mind reeling. $4.2 million. Ryan had been a millionaire, and I'd had no idea. My parents were staring at me expectantly. Everything all right, dear? My mom asked. It's fine. It's just personal. Mr. Brennan cleared his throat. Shall I continue with the formal reading? I nodded, not trusting my voice. The Ryan Matthews Revocable Trust, established March 15, 2022, leaves all assets, properties, and investments to Megan Elizabeth Carter with the minor child, Emily Rose Carter, as secondary beneficiary. Silence. I'm sorry, my dad said slowly. Can you repeat that? All assets go to Meg. What assets exactly? Mr. Brennan consulted his papers. The trust includes a stock portfolio currently valued at approximately $3.1 million, 6 rental properties with a combined equity value of $800,000, 2 savings accounts totaling $150,000, and a life insurance policy worth $200,000. My mother's mouth fell open. That can't be right, she stammered. I assure you it's correct. Ryan was quite successful with his investments. My dad was doing math in his head, his face growing redder by the second. $4.2 million. Approximately, yes. My parents turned to stare at me like I'd been hiding this information from them. Did you know? My mom whispered. No, I said honestly. He never told me the exact numbers. But you knew he had money. I knew we were comfortable. I didn't know we were rich, my dad finished. You're rich, Meg. Mr. Brennan was watching this exchange with professional neutrality, but I could see a flicker of something in his eyes. Disapproval, maybe. There is one more item, he said. Ryan left individual letters for Mr. and Mrs. Carter. He handed my parents a sealed envelope similar to the one he'd given me. My dad tore it open immediately. My mom read over his shoulder, and I watched their expressions change from confusion to shock to something that looked almost like anger. What does it say? I asked. My dad's hands were shaking as he folded the letter. It's nothing, just Ryan expressing his appreciation for our support over the years. But my mom's face told a different story. She looked like she'd been slapped. Can I see it? I asked. It's private, my dad said quickly. So was mine, but this affects all of us. What did Ryan say? My parents exchanged a look. Finally, my mom handed me the letter with trembling fingers. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Carter, I'm writing this letter because I need you to understand something important about the money I'm leaving to Meg. Over the past 7 years, you've made it clear that you don't think I'm successful enough for your daughter. You've questioned my career choices, my salary, and my ability to provide for Meg and Emily. You've suggested multiple times that Meg would be better off with someone who could give her a more secure future. The irony is that I could have given Meg any kind of lifestyle she wanted. I own more assets than you'll probably accumulate in your lifetimes. But I chose to live modestly because I wanted to build a life based on love, not money. I never told you about my investments because your attitude toward Meg has always been conditional on what you think she can get from other people. When she was struggling in college, you told her she should find a rich boyfriend instead of focusing on her studies. When she wanted to foster Emily, you said she couldn't afford a child on her modest income. The truth is, Meg has never needed anyone to rescue her. She's one of the strongest, most capable people I've ever known. But you've spent her entire life convincing her that she's not enough on her own. This money comes with no strings attached. It's Meg's to do with as she chooses. If she wants to give you some of it, that's her decision. But please don't insult her intelligence or mine by pretending that your sudden interest in her financial situation is about anything other than this inheritance. Meg deserves a family that loves her unconditionally. I hope someday you'll figure out how to be that family. Sincerely, Ryan Matthews. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking on Mr. Brennan's wall. My dad's face had gone from red to purple. This is completely inappropriate. Ryan had no right to... To what? I interrupted. To tell the truth. He obviously misunderstood our concerns. We've always been supportive of you. Have you... My mom reached across the space between our chairs and grabbed my hand. Meg, honey, you have to understand. We were just worried about your future, and now that we know you're secure, we're so relieved. Are you? Of course we are. This changes everything. You can quit that stressful job, maybe move somewhere with better schools for Emily. We could even help you find a nice house closer to us so we can be more involved in Emily's life. And there it was. The pivot from, you can't take care of yourself, to let us help you spend your money. I don't need your help. But you shouldn't have to make these decisions alone, my dad said. Managing this kind of wealth requires expertise. We know people who can help. People who'll charge fees to manage money I don't need managed. Meg, be reasonable. This is more money than you've ever had to think about. You can make some very expensive mistakes. Mr. Brennan cleared his throat. If I may interject, Ryan was quite specific about his wishes regarding financial management. The trust includes detailed instructions for investment management and distribution. Meg, you have complete control, but Ryan also set up safeguards to ensure the money lasts for Emily's lifetime and beyond. See, I said to my parents, Ryan thought of everything. But surely you'll want family input on major decisions, my mom pressed. We're Emily's grandparents. We have a vested interest in her future. You had a vested interest in her present too, but you didn't seem very concerned about that last week. The truth was starting to crystallize in my mind, sharp and painful. My parents hadn't just failed me in my moment of greatest need. They'd been calculating how to benefit from my tragedy from the very beginning. All those questions about life insurance and Ryan's salary. All that concern about my ability to support Emily. They hadn't been trying to help me. They'd been trying to position themselves as indispensable so they could control whatever money I inherited. I think we're done here, I said, standing up. Meg, wait, my mom said. We need to talk about this as a family. No, we don't. You're upset right now, and that's understandable, but you can't make major life decisions when you're grieving. You're right. I can't trust my judgment right now. That's why I'm going to do exactly what Ryan wanted me to do. Nothing. I shook Mr. Brennan's hand and thanked him for his professionalism. Then, I walked out of that office, leaving my parents sitting there with their mouths open and their true intentions finally exposed. But they weren't done with me yet. Not by a long shot. I made it exactly 3 blocks from the lawyer's office before my phone started ringing. It was my dad. I let it go to voicemail. Then my mom called, then my dad again. By the time I got home, I had 7 missed calls and 4 text messages. The texts started reasonable. We need to talk about this rationally, but they escalated quickly. You're making a huge mistake. This money is too much responsibility for one person. Think about Emily's future. I turned off my phone and sat in Ryan's office holding his letter in my shaking hands. For the first time since he died, I felt him with me. Not in some mystical way, but in the clarity of his words. He'd known exactly what my parents would do, and he'd tried to protect me from it, even from beyond the grave. Emily came home from school full of stories about her day, blissfully unaware that our lives had just changed forever. Lisa had been picking her up and staying with us until dinner most days, giving me time to handle all the legal and financial details of Ryan's death. "How did the meeting go?" Lisa asked when Emily went upstairs to change clothes. "It was complicated." I told her about the money, about my parents' reaction, about Ryan's letter. She listened without interrupting, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. $4.2 million, she said when I finished. Ryan never said anything, but David always suspected he had more money than he let on. He drove that same Honda for 8 years and lived in this little house when he could have afforded so much more. He said he wanted to live a life based on love, not money. That sounds like Ryan. Lisa was quiet for a moment. "What are you going to do about your parents?" "I don't know. Ryan was right about them. They've never believed I could take care of myself." "Can you?" "I guess I'm about to find out." That evening, after Emily was asleep, I finally turned my phone back on. 12 missed calls, 9 text messages, and 1 voicemail from my brother Jake. "Hey, Meg, Mom and Dad told me what happened today. Look, I know they can be intense, but they really are trying to help. Maybe you could just hear them out. Call me back." I deleted the voicemail without calling him back. The next morning, my parents showed up at my door at 7:30 a.m. I saw them through the kitchen window, standing on my front porch like door-to-door salespeople who weren't going to take no for an answer. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. "We need to talk," my dad said. "We talked yesterday." "Meg, please, we're family. Let us in." Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. Emily was still asleep, and I didn't want them waking her up with whatever drama they were about to bring into my house. We sat in the living room, the same room where Ryan and I had spent countless evenings planning our future, where Emily had opened Christmas presents just 4 months earlier while Ryan documented every moment with his camera. "We've been thinking about yesterday," my mom began, "and we owe you an apology. We handled the news about the inheritance poorly." "Did you?" "We were just shocked. We had no idea Ryan was so successful, and we're concerned about you having to manage such a large sum of money while you're grieving." "Your concern is noted." My dad leaned forward. "Meg, let's be honest here. You've never dealt with serious money before. There are tax implications, investment strategies, legal considerations. You could lose a significant portion of this inheritance if you don't handle it properly." Ryan set up safeguards. Ryan was a software engineer, not a financial advisor. He may have been good at picking stocks, but managing wealth long-term is completely different. "So, what are you suggesting?" My parents exchanged one of their looks. "We think you should transfer a portion of the inheritance into a family trust," my mom said. "Something we can all manage together, for Emily's benefit, of course." "How much is a portion?" "Well, we were thinking maybe 40%, enough to ensure Emily's college education and provide a safety net for emergencies, but not so much that you have to worry about managing it day to day." I stared at them. "You want me to give you 40% of Ryan's money?" "Not give, transfer into a trust for Emily's benefit. A trust that you would control. We would all have input." "No. Meg, be reasonable." I said no. My dad's patient mask finally slipped. "Damn it, Meg, you're being stubborn. Do you have any idea what kind of opportunity this is? This money could set our entire family up for generations if it's handled properly." "Our family? Emily's our granddaughter. We have a responsibility to ensure her future is secure." "Where was that responsibility last week when I called you crying because her father had just died?" "That's not fair, isn't it? You couldn't be bothered to leave Jake's party when I needed you most. But now that there's money involved, suddenly you care about Emily's future." My mom started crying. Real tears this time, not the performed grief from the funeral. "We love you, Meg. We love Emily. We're just trying to do what's best for everyone. What's best for everyone is for you to leave." "You're making a mistake," my dad said, standing up. This money is going to change you. It's going to isolate you from your family, from people who really care about you. People who really care about me don't try to guilt me into giving them my inheritance 3 days after I find out about it. That's when Emily appeared at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Mommy, why is everyone yelling? My parents' entire demeanor shifted instantly. My mom wiped her tears and put on a bright smile. Hi, sweetheart. We were just talking to Mommy about some boring grown-up stuff. Emily came down the stairs and climbed into my lap. Are you sad again, Mommy? A little bit, but I'm okay. Grandma and Grandpa, are you going to help take care of us now that Daddy's in heaven? My parents looked at each other and I saw something pass between them. A moment of shame, maybe, or calculation. Of course we are, baby, my mom said. We're always going to be here for you. Good. Daddy said family is supposed to take care of each other. He was absolutely right, my dad said. And that's why we want to help Mommy make sure you have everything you need. Emily looked up at me with those wise 7-year-old eyes. Do we need help, Mommy? I thought about Ryan's letter, about his faith in my strength, about the notebook he'd left me with all our financial information carefully organized and explained. No, baby, we're going to be fine. Good. Can Grandma and Grandpa make pancakes like Daddy used to? The question hung in the air like a challenge. My parents had never made pancakes for Emily. They'd never made anything for Emily. They'd barely spent time alone with her in the 2 years since the adoption. Maybe another time, my mom said. We should let Mommy get you ready for school. After they left, Emily and I made pancakes together. She stood on a chair next to me at the stove, carefully pouring batter into the pan, while I held my hands ready to catch her if she wobbled. Mommy, do you think Daddy can see us making pancakes? I think he can see everything we do that makes us happy. Then he can see that we're okay without help. Out of the mouths of babes, that afternoon my parents called one more time. When I didn't answer, they sent a text message that showed me exactly who they really were. We're disappointed in your selfishness, Meg. We raised you better than this. If you change your mind about the family trust, you know where to find us. But don't expect us to keep begging you to do the right thing. I screenshot the message and saved it. Then, I blocked their numbers. Because Ryan was right. I deserved a family that loved me unconditionally. And if my parents couldn't be that family, then Emily and I would just have to build our own. The silence after I blocked my parents was both terrifying and peaceful. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't have to worry about disappointing them. I didn't have to explain my choices or defend my decisions, but I also felt completely untethered, like I was floating in space without any reference points. Emily noticed the change immediately. Grandma and Grandpa haven't called in a long time, she said one evening about a week later. They're busy with their own lives, sweetheart. Are they mad at us? The question broke my heart. Emily had already lost one father figure. Now she was losing her grandparents too, and she was smart enough to know it wasn't normal. Sometimes grown-ups disagree about important things, I told her. It doesn't mean anyone did anything wrong, it just means we need some space to figure things out. Like when Tommy and I had a fight about the swing at recess, but then we were friends again the next day. Something like that. But I knew it wouldn't be like that. My parents had shown me who they really were, and there was no taking that back. 3 weeks after the will reading, I got a call from my Aunt Carol, my mom's sister. We'd never been particularly close, but she'd always been kind to me at family gatherings. Meg, honey, I heard about what happened with your parents. What exactly did you hear? Your mother called me crying, saying you'd cut them out of your life over money. But I've known your parents for 50 years, and I have a feeling there's more to the story. I told her everything. About the phone call the night Ryan died, about their behavior at the funeral, about their demands for 40% of the inheritance. Carol was quiet for a long time after I finished. I'm not surprised, she finally said. Your parents have always been conditional in their affections. I used to watch you as a little girl trying so hard to earn their approval. It broke my heart. Then why didn't you ever say anything? Because they're my family too, and I kept hoping they'd figure out how to love you the way you deserved. But I think some people are just too selfish to love anyone more than they love themselves. Emily keeps asking about them. Emily's better off without that kind of toxic energy in her life. Trust me on that. Carol became an unexpected ally. She started calling Emily every week, sending care packages, remembering school events. She was everything my parents had never been supportive, without being demanding, loving, without conditions. Ryan's family stepped up too. David and Lisa became my chosen family, showing up for Emily's school plays and soccer games, babysitting when I needed a break, treating me like the sister they'd never had. But the biggest surprise came from an unexpected source. 2 months after the will reading, I was at the grocery store with Emily when a woman approached me in the cereal aisle. "Excuse me, are you Meg Carter?" I tensed, wondering if she was some friend of my parents who'd been sent to guilt me into reconciliation. "Yes. I'm Sandra Wilson. My daughter Katie goes to school with Emily." I remembered Katie. She and Emily had become friends during the weeks after Ryan's death when Emily was struggling to process her grief. "My daughter talks about Emily all the time," Sandra continued. "She told me Emily's dad died recently, and I just wanted you to know that if you ever need anything, anything at all, our family is here for you." That's very kind, but I'm serious. Single parenting is hard enough without having to navigate grief, too. Katie would love to have Emily over for play dates, and I'd be happy to help with carpools or after-school care or just being an extra adult when you need one. I started crying right there next to the Cheerios. "I'm sorry," I said, embarrassed. "I don't know why I'm crying." "Because someone offered to help without expecting anything in return," Sandra said gently. "It happens less often than it should." Sandra became another piece of my new chosen family. She picked Emily up from school when I had appointments, invited us to family barbecues, treated Emily like one of her own kids. Meanwhile, my parents made one last attempt to assert control over my life. I got a letter from a lawyer in their hometown claiming that they were concerned about Emily's welfare and requesting a formal assessment of my fitness as a parent. The letter suggested that my recent erratic behavior and isolation from family support systems indicated that I might not be providing a stable environment for my daughter. I called Mr. Brennan immediately. "Can they do this?" I asked. "They can try, but they have no legal standing. Emily is your adopted daughter, and you have sole custody. Their lawyer is probably just trying to scare you into backing down." "What should I do?" "Document everything. Keep records of Emily's school performance, her doctor visits, her social activities. Show that she's thriving in your care. And consider getting a restraining order if they continue to harass you." I didn't need the restraining order. After their lawyer's letter was dismissed by family court for lack of merit, my parents finally gave up. But their final message came through Jake, who called me 6 months after the will reading. "Mom and Dad wanted me to tell you that they're writing you out of their will," he said. "They don't want you to be surprised later." Okay. That's it. Jake, they've been threatening to cut me off my whole life. The only difference now is that I don't need their money anymore. "This is crazy, Meg. You're destroying our family over money." "No, I'm protecting my family from people who only care about money. Emily's going to grow up without grandparents because you're being stubborn. Emily's going to grow up without toxic people in her life because I'm being strong." That was the last conversation I had with any of them. As Emily's 8th birthday approached, I realized we'd been okay for months. More than okay. We'd been happy. I'd quit my stressful job and found part-time consulting work that let me be more present for Emily. We'd traveled to see Ryan's college friends in California, taken a cruise with David, and Lisa's family started horseback riding lessons because Emily had always wanted to try. Most importantly, I'd used part of Ryan's money to establish the Ryan Matthews STEM Scholarship at our local community college. Every year, we'd award full tuition to 3 students studying engineering or computer science. Students like Ryan who had brilliant minds but limited financial resources. Emily helped me review applications and pick recipients. It became our way of keeping Ryan's memory alive while helping other people achieve their dreams. On the evening of Emily's 8th birthday, after the last party guest had gone home and the dishes were done, She climbed into my lap on the living room couch. Mommy, do you think Daddy would be proud of us? I thought about everything we'd accomplished in the past year. How Emily's grades had improved once she felt secure again. How we'd built a support network of people who loved us without conditions. How we'd honored Ryan's memory by helping others. I think Daddy would be amazed by how strong and kind and brave you've become. What about you? Are you proud of yourself? The question caught me off guard. For 35 years, I'd measured my worth by other people's approval. By my parents' impossible standards, by teachers' grades, by coworkers' opinions. But sitting there with Emily in our peaceful house, surrounded by photos of our chosen family, and reminders of the life we'd built together, I realized something had shifted. Yeah, baby, I think I am proud of myself. Good, because I'm proud of you too. 6 months later, I got a wedding invitation in the mail. My cousin Jessica was getting married, and she'd invited Emily and me to the ceremony. I almost threw the invitation away, assuming my parents would be there and not wanting to deal with the drama. But then I remembered something Ryan used to say about not letting other people's bad behavior control my choices. Emily and I went to the wedding. My parents were there, of course, looking older and smaller than I remembered. They watched us from across the room but didn't approach. During the reception, my Aunt Carol came over to our table. "You look happy," she said. "We are." Good. That's what Ryan would have wanted. As we were leaving, my mom appeared beside our car. "Meg, wait." I stopped but didn't let go of Emily's hand. "I just wanted to say..." She paused, looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. "I miss you. We miss you. I miss the parents I thought I had too. Maybe we could try again, start over." I looked down at Emily, who was watching this interaction with curious eyes. What would starting over look like? I don't know, but I know I made mistakes. We made mistakes. Yes, you did. So could we try? Could you forgive us? For a moment, I felt that old familiar pull, the desperate desire to have parents who loved me unconditionally, the hope that maybe this time would be different. Then I remembered the phone call the night Ryan died, the demands for money at his will reading, the lawyer's letter questioning my fitness as a mother. "Maybe someday," I said, "but not today, and not until you can prove that you want a relationship with us that has nothing to do with money. How do we prove that?" "I guess you'll have to figure that out." I buckled Emily into her car seat and drove away without looking back. Because I'd finally learned the most important lesson of my life. I didn't need anyone's permission to choose my own family. I didn't need anyone's approval to protect my daughter from toxic people. And I definitely didn't need anyone's validation to know that Ryan had been right about me all along. I was stronger than I knew. And I was enough all by myself. So, if you're going through something similar, if you're dealing with family members who only love you conditionally, who only show up when there's something in it for them, I want you to know something. You deserve better. You deserve people who celebrate your happiness instead of trying to profit from your pain. You deserve relationships that don't come with strings attached. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who share your DNA, but don't share your values. Because family isn't just about blood. It's about love, support, and showing up when it matters most. And real family doesn't come with a price tag. What do you think? Have you ever had to choose between toxic family members and your own peace of mind? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that matter. I'll see you in the next one.